Well, hello class, and welcome to the beginning of week 2 of our, believe it or not, only 8-week class in organizational behavior. So here's kind of the thing we're looking at with this course. Okay, so last week we jumped in, right? We jumped right in with all sorts of content. We did an intro to organizational behavior. We kicked off our content on the habit loop. You wrote your first journal entry. You took your first quiz. You watched a number of videos. You did your readings, you did all this content, right? You had this debate, you went back and forth, and there was all sorts of discussions. So you will find that this is kind of the repetitive rhythm of our time together, okay? So let me kind of fill you in on my philosophical approach, I guess you could say, to online education, okay? So I am of the mind, well, and I would even say it's not just online education; it's all education. And I want to give you some method to my madness, if you want to put it that way. I want to kind of give you some insight into how and why things occur the way they do in this class, and hopefully make sense of a lot of this content for you as you progress through the class. Okay, so let me talk about kind of my, I guess I could say my. I'm gonna give you kind of a nutshell, if you will, description of organizational behavior. Okay, so if you were to break down, I think I may even allude to this, organizational behavior is really this why behind the what. Okay, so we talked about this, I'm fairly certain, but why do people do the things that they do? So how does the social, emotional, psychological type, so even sociological, cultural realities play into our organizational behaviors, right? So last week we looked at the psychological, the sociological, the archaeological, all of these different elements that come into helping to inform, to frame, and to kind of make organizational behavior what it is, okay? So it's this idea that we're dealing with these systems, these organizations, these social orders, if you will, that are made up of what? They're made up of people, right? So people create organizations. A number of years ago, if you remember, there was some discussion, and I believe it was presidential candidate Mitt Romney said, I'm going to butcher this, but something along the lines of organizations are people, right? So, and he got some flack for that. He got some flack from other things, as all politicians get flack for basically everything. You can't say anything without being scrutinized. But there is a lot of truth to that statement. Regardless of where you kind of lay on the political spectrum of things, there is some truth to the fact that, let's just say it, organizations are people. And what I mean by that is they're made up of people, right? You can't have an organization without people. And I know there's, lots of conversations, people trying to create, artificial intelligence and all those different things, robots and what have you. But organizations are made up of people. And with that come all sorts of realities, okay? So emotional, physical, mental, psychological, spiritual, right? Cultural, all of these elements kind of come into creating these interesting organizational dynamics that cause for behaviors, which hopefully you're starting to see the connection already, why we're having a book, obviously the Nahavandi book, so organizational behavior, why we're coupling that text with a book on habits, right? So in habits, our human habits, the things that we habitually do, they form in some ways either who we are or they're formed out of who we are, right? So there's elements of within that, and if you think about there's organizational culture we'll get to here in a bit. These cultural realities of organizations come into play by way of habits, right? These things that have been solidified and firmed up over days, weeks, months, years, decades, right? For some organizations, even centuries. So think about last week. Think about the experience that you had. Okay, so and I'm gonna give you some insight now into why I handled things the way that I did this last week. So I gave you a video. Okay, it didn't work. There were some technical glitches that came up with that. So you had to download a video and watch it. It probably took a while. Some of you who were patient, you watched it. Some of you who were not as patient, you didn't watch it. So because of that, you missed out on potentially some information, some things were unclear. Some of you, you emailed with questions. Some of you engaged in some group discussions in the forum. Some of you may have gone back and forth in email. I don't know, because I remember I asked you to remove my name, my email address from your correspondence. Some of you wondered why is he out there? Is he detached? Is he paying attention? There's a lot of emotions that came through last week. Some of you reached out and asked questions. Some of you asked for clarification. Some of you just sat back idly and didn't do anything. Think about those dynamics and how those realities play out, not just individually here, not just as a corporate setting from an organizational setting as this class is, but think about how you bring all of you to everything that you do, whether it's this class, whether it's your relationships, or whether it's you at your workplace. Okay, so all of those realities come in to inform who you are, what you think, and why you do the things that you do. Okay, so I hope you see this. As we talk about the underlying realities of organizational behavior, this content it's very applicable because it's everything that you and I experience on a daily basis. Okay, so today we start week 2 and we get into culture and diversity and self-awareness. We talk about personality, we talk about emotions and values, and then we look at this idea that our brain has this craving aspect to it, right? So there's lots of content to explore as we dig in to what we're looking at this week. Okay, I want to clarify a couple of things. So as you get into Unit 2, okay, you have your readings, you have this video that hopefully you're watching right now, and then there's some discussion questions. There are some self-assessments that I need you to complete in self-assessment 2.1 and 3.3. Okay, there's a journal entry number 2, and then there's the organizational design project continued for you to engage in discussion. Okay, so that's what we're looking at this week. All right. We also have, if you get into it, if you look in the syllabus, you have quiz number 2. Okay, so you want to make sure you complete quiz number 2, and then you will continue on progressing through. You will notice now, as we look at week number 2, you will notice that I am much more engaged in the discussions. Okay, so you're much more engaged now. I'm much more engaged now in what it is that you are doing. So conversation, you'll see my name interjected in your discussions, and I'll just tell you up front, I won't respond to everything. So please know that I won't respond to everything. I don't think I need to respond to everything. In fact, I don't think you need me to respond to everything. Okay, but you will find that I will interject and I will engage in content. Okay, so and I think that's helpful. Hopefully you've seen by now that if you write an email that you get a response fairly quickly. Okay, so I don't want you to be thinking that just because we're in an online classroom, I'm just sitting back twiddling my thumbs, not responding. No, I want to get back to you as quickly as I can. In fact, I got an email from a student in another online class I'm teaching. Sent it at 9:27 this morning. I saw it come in my inbox and I responded right away. And she said, "Wow, I can't believe you responded that quickly." And I said, "Well, I want you to know that I'm very responsive and I want to answer your questions for you." Okay, so just know that that's kind of our approach as we dig into it. So there's lots of content, and I hope you found that the books we're reading, these are really meaningful texts, right? So as we get into it, here's what's so important about this topic. As I'm sure you found, and we talked about this already, with every course you'll take in, whether it's the leadership program or the org psych program, and I think it's important for us to hammer home this every single day, or every single time we're doing a video or in discussion. What you learn today, I mean, literally what you're learning in these books, what you're going to read in the organizational behavior book today, will be applicable and something you can put into practice tomorrow. In fact, you could even put it into practice today when you get home, right? If you're watching this from work, if you work later into the evening, you get home, you see family or whatever it is, your neighbors, your roommates, or you go to work tomorrow and you say, okay, now I realize, based upon X, Y, and Z, there are these, based upon these personality realities, right? You're probably familiar with Myers-Briggs type indicator, and some of the conversations could revolve around strengths and different DISC profiles, all these realities, the diverse workforce that we have, all of those aspects play into creating a culture, play into creating a reality that you deal with on a regular basis, which gives explanation in some ways for why certain people do what it is that they do in the workplace. As we are sensitive to these realities, we pay attention to these realities, as we dig deep and we don't ignore what's happening in the personal lives of people, as we don't ignore what's happening in the professional lives of people, we make connections that help us to be better informed, and I think in many ways, if not entirely, work better with our colleagues as we understand them better. I remember being in this class, okay? I was not taking the class, but I was sitting in the class. And I remember I was in Colorado. We offered the leadership program out there a number of years ago, about a decade ago. And I remember sitting there, and there was an individual from Guatemala. Maybe you've heard me say this before. There's an individual from Guatemala, and as we talk about these realities of listening, so this importance of dialogue, which we'll look at over the course of our time here in class. So the student said, he's from Guatemala, and he said, hold on a second. He was talking to the professor. So he said, what you're telling me, professor, is that listening to people is important. And the instructor in the class said, well, yes, listening is very important. And he says, he just kind of like has this, his mind, his head is shaking, like, what are you talking about? And the professor says, why, that's an interesting thing for you to mention, because it would just seem to be, I don't know, maybe common sense that listening is important. He said, well, he says, literally these are his words. He says, where I'm from, we don't listen to people. We just wait for the other person to shut up so we can interject our word, because we want to hear ourselves talk and give, feedback. And so they had this really thoughtful, important, meaningful conversation about the importance of listening. Right? Not just hearing, but listening, truly listening to what it is that's being said, what it is that's not being said, and to listen to the lives of people around us. So to do well in this field, to understand people organizationally well, takes work. It takes focus. It takes our attention, and it takes us not just hearing, but truly listening and seeing perhaps the rhythms that were there but are no longer there, and going, okay, so what's going on here? It takes time really investing in people and wanting to know them so we know how to best take care of our colleagues, of our supervisors, of our supervisees, the people with whom we work, and so forth. So I hope that, I pray that, in fact, I'm fully confident that what you learn in this class will transform the way that you interact relationally. It will transform the way that you even interact with yourself personally. It will interact the way that you act professionally in your workplaces. And it will, if you're not yet in that place, when you're supervising other people, you will be more in tune with your people's needs so that you make sure that you serve them well. Okay, so this is a great week of learning. I'm really looking forward to engaging in discussion and to hearing from all of you. Some of the content that was shared last week was just fantastic. So as you think about where you were, think about then, how does that content inform where it is that we're headed in week 2 of organizational behavior here in our summer term. All right. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing you online.